When did you realize your ex's ambition masked a dangerous debt? Or slash am I the asshole AITA for wanting to burn down a fancy boutique after finding out my estranged wife owes loan sharks money and is getting harassed online? I literally just got off the phone with my lawyer about the divorce papers, and I feel like I'm going to throw up the Talenti gelato I stress ate 2 hours ago. I don't even know where to start with this dumpster fire, honestly. It's 1:57 a.m. I am sitting in my beat-up 2018 Honda Civic in the parking lot of a 24-hour Walgreens. And I am typing this out because if I tell one more person in real life, I think my head will explode. Buckle up because past me Albert Lewis 40M was such an idiot, and this involves my soon-to-be ex-wife, a crazy religious mom, and a whole lot of really bad ill-advised loans. My marriage to Lillian Davis 37F was technically dead about 18 months ago, but we've been dragging the actual paperwork out. We were together for 9 years, married for 5. Last June was our anniversary, and I swear I saw the rot starting then. Lillian has always been, let's call her ambitious and maybe slightly reckless with money. She also has this terrible habit of constantly needing external validation, which translated into serial cheating for the last couple of years we were together. I know, red flag the size of Texas, but I was in denial and focused on my own life, which was a mess because my job in commercial real estate was stressing me out and I was in therapy trying to fix myself. Past me was truly delusional. Lillian works at this high-end women's clothing place called Chic Happenstance Boutique on Main Street that sells $600 sweaters and scarves that look like they came from a craft fair but cost $250. It's all about appearance with Lillian. She needed the designer clothes and the perfect apartment 3B near downtown, even though we were constantly stressed about the $1,247 monthly rent plus utilities. She always made just enough, but then she'd go and drop $300 on a spontaneous trip to the spa or insist we needed the newest AirPods even though her current pair was fine. The money situation got weird about 6 months ago. She started getting increasingly frantic about bills. We used to split the rent 50-50 and I'd cover the utilities, but suddenly she was short every single month. It was always a different excuse. Oh, the $43.67 grocery bill was higher than I thought. Or I had to pay $85 for a plumber because the toilet backed up at work and they reimbursed me late. Small amounts at first, but they added up. Then came the large, unauthorized withdrawals. I noticed on our joint account, yes, we still had one. I know that there were repeated, usually round number withdrawals. $200 here, $200 there, sometimes 3 times in a week. When I asked her about it, this was back in February, right before I finally moved out, she went nuclear. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. It was a Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. and I was trying to meal prep chicken breast for the week. Hey, I noticed 4 $200 withdrawals last week. What's going on? That's $800. Lillian, she was scrolling through TikTok on her Samsung Galaxy, completely ignoring me at first. Her nails were freshly manicured, of course. It's fine, Albert, just managing some things. Me managing what? We have a $347 electric bill due and the account is looking low. Are you paying a separate credit card I don't know about? Lillian, God, you're so controlling. You're always looking over my shoulder. It's work stuff, okay? Just drop it. I'm handling it. She refused to elaborate. I dropped it because I was exhausted and frankly, I had already mentally checked out of the marriage due to her constant emotional manipulation and the general feeling that she despised me. That same week, I got a Cash App notification. $3,000 sent from her to someone named FA Services. $3,000. I demanded an explanation. She said it was a loan from a friend who needed emergency surgery and she was just covering it temporarily. I didn't believe her, but I didn't have the energy to fight. I just said, I'm done, Lillian. Get your own place. I'm moving out. And GL, I knew I should have frozen the joint account immediately, but I was too overwhelmed with finding a new place and dealing with my own emotional baggage. Fast forward 4 months. I'm living in a furnished sublet, paying my own expenses and feeling marginally better. The divorce is moving slowly. Lillian is still at Chic Happenstance, still maintaining this facade of perfection. This is where Frances Adams 55F comes in. Frances is Lillian's coworker and rival. She's the ambitious upstart who always wanted Lillian's manager position at the boutique. Frances, bless her heart, has zero subtlety. I ran into her at a Starbucks on the corner of 5th and Elm last week. I was waiting for my venti cold brew, trying to look busy on my iPhone 14, which is constantly running out of storage naturally. Frances came right up to me, whispered, and looked around nervously like we were passing state secrets. Frances, Albert, hey, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know what Lillian is involved in. Me, I felt my stomach drop instantly. I thought she was going to tell me Lillian was engaged to one of her boyfriends. Frances, we're divorced almost. I really don't care who she's dating. Frances, no, this isn't about dating. This is about John Peterson 51M and the boutique and the money. Apparently, Lillian had gone past just being broke. She had started borrowing money from loan sharks, the kind who don't use PayPal or Zelle, they use Cash App and sometimes just plain cash. The original $3,000 I saw. That was just the first tranche. Frances told me that Lillian had taken out 5 separate short-term, incredibly high-interest loans over the past 6 months, mainly to cover inventory shortfalls at the boutique. She was trying to hide how badly Chic Happenstance was performing, and worse, she was using the loans to buy things she couldn't live without, like a new Peloton and a $1,500 handbag she claimed was a gift from a rich relative. The money started small, facilitated through her cousin John Peterson 51M, who is the definition of an enabling relative. John, who lives 2 states away, has always been Lillian's safety net and her secret keeper. He apparently put her in touch with the wrong kind of people when she ran into trouble. He thought he was helping, but he was just digging her hole deeper. Frances spilled the whole tea, leaning in so close I could smell her expensive Chanel perfume. Frances, the loans were compounding. She was due $15,000 by the end of this month. And Albert, she hasn't paid anyone back since the initial interest payment 2 weeks ago. The people she owes, they're getting aggressive. I was speechless. I literally stammered. Wait, what, 15,000? Who is she dealing with? Frances. They don't have names, Albert. They just have a reputation, and they're not just calling her, they're calling the store, and they're getting creative. This is where the complication hits. The online harassment. Frances showed me her phone. It was open to a private group on Facebook, but the posts were public. Someone had created a dedicated Instagram account called @LILLYISA Thief and was tagging chic happenstance in pictures of Lillian wearing the expensive clothes she couldn't afford. But it gets darker. They weren't just shaming her. They were using her photos and writing incredibly graphic, threatening things I can't even type here, about what they were going to do to her if she didn't pay the money. They were also posting photos of the inside of the boutique-specific display cases, implying they knew exactly where she worked and could show up at any minute. It felt like a sick digital kidnapping note. My rage was instant and blinding. Even though I hated her guts for the cheating and the lying and the general destruction of my life, the idea of her being physically unsafe and publicly humiliated like this triggered some ancient protective instinct. I walked out of Starbucks, forgetting my cold brew, RIP $6.50, and drove straight to her apartment. I didn't knock. I used the old code 1984, her birthday. I should have changed it months ago, but I was too distracted by work and trying to keep my head above water. When I got into apartment 3B, Lillian was not there, but her mother was. Claire Hughes, 64F, my former mother-in-law. Claire is not just religious, she is a religious extremist. She views anything that isn't straight-up Bible reading as a moral failing. Claire blamed me entirely for the divorce, claiming I didn't lead my family strongly enough, which is rich coming from a woman who drives her beat-up Toyota Corolla everywhere and thinks Hulu and Disney Plus are tools of the devil. Claire was sitting in the dimly lit living room, clutching a worn Bible, looking pale and furious. Claire, Albert, what are you doing here? You should not be in my daughter's apartment. Me, where is Lillian? Claire, did you know she's in debt to criminals? Did you know they're threatening her online? Claire sighed, closing her Bible with a heavy thump. I know everything, Albert. I always knew she lacked moral fortitude. She strayed from the Lord's path and now she is reaping what she sowed. Me reaping? Claire, someone is threatening to hurt your daughter. Claire, perhaps this is the wake-up call she needs. Her cousin John told me about those horrid men. He tried to help, but John is weak. Lillian needs to repent. She needs to accept the shame and the consequences of her lack of faith. I was literally shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. The cognitive dissonance was deafening. Her mother was watching her daughter get terrorized and was treating it like a spiritual counseling session. Me, so you're just letting this happen? Claire, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I am praying, Albert. But I also saw the post this morning, the one on that dreadful Faceplace or whatever it's called. It's truly disgusting, but maybe if she had focused on modesty and true Christian principles instead of those expensive clothes at that boutique she works at, she wouldn't be in this situation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to read a newspaper instead of the Bible for 5 minutes, but I didn't. I just grabbed my old laptop, the one I left behind, and started rifling through Lillian's desk. She had a small, locked metal box. I remembered the code instantly, the same as her Netflix password, a character from The Office plus her old gym locker number. Inside, there wasn't a ledger, just a single folded piece of paper. It wasn't a contract. It was a letter dated 3 days ago. It was written on expensive stationery, the kind Lillian loved, and the handwriting was clean, elegant, and definitely not hers. I started reading it. It wasn't signed, but the content was chilling. Lillian, we understand circumstances change. However, you were explicitly warned that failure to meet the $15,000 repayment schedule would result in collateral reassessment. We have the $15,000 figure, but we believe you have additional valuable assets that could cover this obligation, especially those belonging to your husband, Albert Lewis 40M, whom we understand is finalizing a divorce from you. We have his address in Westfield. We also know that he is a reliable source of income, unlike your cousin John. Tell Albert that his safety and the safety of his current place of residence are now collateral for your debt. If the full amount plus penalties, $22,000 total now, by 5:30 p.m. Friday is not transferred, we will escalate the situation from online shaming to physical visitation. You have brought this into your private sphere. Now we are bringing it into ours. We have enjoyed watching you work at Chic Happenstance. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly I almost tore the delicate paper. They knew where I lived. They knew my full name and age. They knew the divorce status. They had pulled my details from somewhere using her debt to leverage me. I looked at Claire, who was still muttering about repentance and salvation. Me, Claire, you need to call Lillian right now. They know where I live. Claire, Albert, this is the devil testing your patience. You need to pray for strength. I saw red. I grabbed the letter and my old laptop, leaving Claire alone with her Bible. I drove straight back to my car, the one currently in the Walgreens parking lot where I am typing this frantic message. I called my lawyer Mark, but it's 2 a.m. and he's probably asleep. I left a rambling voicemail sounding like a lunatic. I'm an expert in commercial real estate, not organized crime. I don't know if Lillian is safe. I don't know if she intended to draw me into this, given the cheating. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past her. All I know is that someone is watching her, harassing her online, and now they are threatening my safety unless I pay the $22,000 that my soon-to-be ex-wife accrued trying to maintain a fantasy lifestyle and cover up fraud at her retail job. I just got a text message notification on my iPhone. It was Lillian. She texted, Albert, I saw what they posted about you. I need you to understand I didn't mean for this. I need you to help me. I'm at the boutique. Can you meet me now? I have the proof. Then 2 more texts came in immediately, one from an unknown number. Unknown, don't go to the boutique, Albert. She doesn't have the proof, we do, and we're waiting. I looked at the time, 2:09 a.m. The boutique chic happenstance should be locked up tight. Why is she there? I have $4,000 in my savings. I definitely do not have $22,000 to drop by 5:30 p.m. Friday. And now I have 2 conflicting texts, one from my reckless, possibly manipulative ex and one from the people who just threatened my life. I need to know what proof Lillian has. But I feel like if I drive to that boutique right now, I'm walking into a trap set by people who have proven they are not afraid of physical violence or online terror. What the actual fuck am I supposed to do? Tell me I'm not crazy for thinking about calling the police, even though these guys seem way outside of local jurisdiction. I'm terrified. I am shaking. I need to know what she's doing at Chic Happenstance right now. R/am I the asshole AITA for wanting to burn down a fancy boutique after finding out my estranged wife owes loan sharks money and is getting harassed online. Part 2. I looked at those 2 texts on my iPhone 14 Lillian's, pleading for help and the unknown numbers threatening my actual physical safety, and I sat there in the Walgreens parking lot for a solid 45 minutes just breathing into a paper bag I found under my seat. I was literally paralyzed. If I drive to Chic Happenstance, I'm walking into a potential beatdown or worse. If I ignore Lillian and she is genuinely in danger, I'll never forgive myself. Even if she is a cheating, financially destructive, manipulative nightmare, she's still the person I spent 9 years with. NGL, the protective instinct is stupidly strong. I called Mark, my lawyer, again, still no answer. I left another voicemail that was probably even more hysterical than the first one. I told him someone was threatening to use my address as collateral for my soon-to-be ex-wife's $22,000 loan shark debt. I probably sounded like I was reading the plot of a bad straight-to-DVD movie. I decided not to go inside the boutique. That was the compromise. I would drive by and see if her beat-up blue Mini Cooper was there. If it was, I'd call the non-emergency police line. Small victory, right? Being slightly less suicidal in my decision-making. It was 3:15 a.m. when I pulled onto Main Street. The entire downtown area was dead except for the glow of the few remaining streetlights. Chic Happenstance looked exactly like the expensive, pretentious facade it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows perfectly displayed $900 dresses. And yes, the Mini Cooper was parked 2 spaces down. I stopped my Civic across the street, killed the engine, and just watched. The boutique looked dark except for a very faint sliver of light coming from the back office area. I pulled out my phone, typed 911, and waited. I was about to hit send when Lillian's face appeared in the window looking frantic. She was tapping rapidly on the glass, mouthing something I couldn't make out. She wasn't wearing one of the expensive boutique sweaters. She looked like she'd been rolling around on the floor. Her perfect makeup was smeared. The fear was instantly replaced by pure adrenaline. I crossed the street, keeping my eyes peeled for any giant tattooed figures lurking in the shadows. When I got to the front door, it was locked. Lillian was fumbling with the keys inside. Lillian, Albert, open it quickly. She finally got the latch undone, practically shoving the heavy glass door open and dragged me inside. She slammed the door shut and flipped the lock and deadbolt immediately. Me? Lillian, what the hell are you doing here at 3:20 a.m.? Who are those people? They texted me and threatened my apartment. Lillian was shaking uncontrollably. She smelled faintly of cheap, stale coffee in desperation. Lillian, I know. I'm so sorry, I didn't know they had your address. John must have given it to them. John Peterson, the enabling cousin, just keeps enabling, right? TBH, I'm not surprised. Me, John, why would he never mind? What is the proof? Why are you here? This place is a trap. She took me straight to the back office, which was a tiny, cramped space dominated by a heavy, old metal filing cabinet and a single desk littered with receipts and empty Diet Coke cans. The only light source was a small, dusty lamp on the desk. Lillian, the money I borrowed wasn't all for clothes, Albert, not initially. I covered inventory. Francis Adams and I were running the books and things were really bad, worse than anyone knew. Me, the withdrawals, the $3,000 to FA services. Lillian, that was the first loan, but I didn't take it out. She did. She reached into the filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder marked Q2 expenses. Inside were not financial statements, but photocopies of cashier's checks and wire transfers. All highly illegal, I could tell even in the dim light. She pointed to a series of large wire transfers all made out to different obscure LLCs totaling nearly $45,000 over the last year. Lillian, Francis Adams. She's been embezzling from the boutique for over a year. She framed me. She needed a way to cover the shortfalls because she's trying to buy into a partnership in Scottsdale, and she blew her initial seed money. I stared at the documents. They look legit. Wire transfers, signed authorization forms that were clearly forged with the owner's signature, but the movement of funds was there. Francis, the upstart rival, wasn't just ambitious, she was a criminal. Me. Francis told me you were the one stealing. She was the one who approached me at Starbucks. Lillian, of course she did. She was trying to pin the whole thing on me before I found the records. I found these 2 days ago, hidden in a false bottom in the cabinet. I think she panicked when I started digging, which is why the online harassment and the loan shark escalation happened. She put me in touch with those guys, Albert. She told John they were just short-term investors. This blew my mind. Francis, the purveyor of high-end perfume and fake concern, was the architect of this whole disaster. She set Lillian up as the fall guy and then used the loan sharks to pressure Lillian into keeping quiet or taking the blame. And now she's using the loan sharks to target me. Lillian looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Lillian, I was covering for her theft at first because she promised me a cut and said she'd give me the manager position, but then she just kept taking more and I had to start borrowing myself just to pay my rent and keep up appearances. I'm a terrible person, Albert. I know that, the cheating, the lying, it was all about keeping up a life I couldn't afford and I let Francis use me, but I need to go to the police with this. Me, and tell them what? That you were an accessory to embezzlement and then you knowingly borrowed $22,000 from organized criminals who are currently threatening my life. The situation felt impossibly complicated. I took photos of every single document on my phone. Suddenly, a loud, sustained bang came from the front window, echoing terrifyingly in the small space. It sounded like something hitting the glass hard. Lillian gasped, clutching my arm. "They're here." I grabbed her and shoved her toward the back door of the boutique, which opened onto a narrow service alleyway. We need to go now? Well, figure out the legal stuff later. If they get their hands on those documents, we are both screwed. We scrambled out the back door, Lillian still clutching the file folder like a life raft. We ran down the alley, heart rates through the roof. I don't remember running that fast since high school track. We emerged onto a quieter side street. I pulled out my phone and called 911, not the non-emergency line. Yes, I need police immediate assistance at 1450 Main Street, chic happenstance. I believe there are armed intruders trying to gain entry. My ex-wife and I were just threatened. They mentioned kidnapping and physical violence. I gave the operator the address and then immediately hung up before I could elaborate on the loan shark embezzlement stuff. I just needed the police there to scare them off. NGL. I drove Lillian back to my furnished sublet. It was temporary housing, not my actual place in Westfield that they threatened, but still, I didn't want to risk her being alone. We spent the rest of the night sitting in silence in my small, beige living room. I didn't offer her a blanket. I didn't offer her coffee. I just sat there looking at the documents on my phone, formulating a plan. The police showed up at the boutique, apparently found a damaged storefront, took a report, and called me back around 5:00 a.m. They asked me to come down for a formal statement later that morning. They mentioned that the damage looked like a heavy piece of metal was thrown through the outer window frame, but the inner security glass held. I told Lillian that morning, I will handle this, but only because my name and address are now involved. You are going to do exactly what I say. No more talking to John, no more talking to Francis, no more responding to those online accounts, and definitely no more loans. Got it? She just nodded, defeated. It was the first time I'd seen her truly humble. The serial cheater, the high roller, the facade was completely shattered. Maybe Claire's reaping what you sow was partially right, just applied to the wrong person, Francis. So it's been 2 weeks since the terrifying 3 a.m. trip to the boutique. I haven't slept properly since. My job in commercial real estate is suffering. I'm late on 3 deadlines. My new motto is ramen and rage. I met with Mark, my lawyer, the next morning, Wednesday. Mark, a 60-year-old man who usually deals with boring stuff like property lines and non-competes, listened to my whole story: the debt, the cheating, the religious extremist mother-in-law, the embezzlement proof, the online harassment, and the physical threats. He looked like he aged 5 years during the hour. Mark's advice was immediate and clear. Albert, this is no longer a divorce matter. This is a criminal matter. You have provided documented evidence of felony embezzlement and probable organized crime involvement. You need to turn over those documents immediately, but not to the local police. We need to go through the FBI or at least the state attorney's office. And we need to get a restraining order against Lillian's mother, Claire, because frankly, her religious zealotry is a liability. The second part of his advice was about the threat against me. Mark, we need to get you out of that sublet and into a secure, undisclosed location today. We also need to sever all joint financial ties yesterday. This led to the most irritating logistical nightmare of my life. Changing all the passwords, freezing the joint bank account, finally, I know, calling the landlord for the sublet, finding a new, even smaller shoebox apartment. It was chaos. I was living out of 2 suitcases for 3 days while waiting for the background check on the new rental. Update: this morning, 3 days after the boutique incident, Friday, 9:00 a.m. Remember the deadline? $22,000 due by 5:30 p.m. Friday. The pressure was intense. The online harassment escalated exponentially, even though Lillian had stopped responding. The Instagram account at LILLYISA Thief changed its bio to include my full name, Albert Lewis, 40M, enabling spouse of a felon. Pay the $22,000 or suffer the consequences. They even posted a picture of my Honda Civic parked outside the boutique that night. I wish I was joking about the level of surveillance. I was completely losing it. I saw a post that morning where they had taken one of Lillian's professional headshots and photoshopped a bruise onto her face, implying what would happen next. Even though she broke my heart repeatedly, this was making me physically sick. I told Mark I was seriously considering just paying the $22,000 to make them go away. I had $4,000 saved, and I could liquidate $18,000 from my 401k, taking the massive tax hit. It seemed like the fastest path to safety. Mark flat out refused. Albert, you pay them once, they own you forever. They'll just invent a new, bigger debt next month. You have proof of a crime. We fight fire with fire. I agreed, but it felt risky. Mark and I took the embezzlement documents and went straight to the state attorney's office. It was tedious and took hours. They were initially skeptical, a low-level employee at a small boutique committing $45,000 in fraud. But when they saw the scale of the debt and the clear connection to documented physical threats against both Lillian and me, they took it seriously. They immediately launched an investigation into Francis Adams and the various LLCs. Lillian, who was holed up in my temporary new undisclosed apartment, I had to tell someone where I was, started receiving the most vile, terrifying text messages ever. The threats moved from general shaming to specific torture fantasies. She finally confessed that she recognized one of the unknown numbers. It was a burner phone Francis had used occasionally at work. It clicked. Francis wasn't just leveraging the loan sharks, she was directly involved in the harassment campaign herself. She was the one running the Instagram account. I showed the state attorney's team the texts, including the ones confirming Frances's involvement. The good news, they could potentially get a warrant to trace the burner phone and the Instagram account. The bad news, warrants take time, and the deadline was 5:30 p.m. 5:00 p.m. rolled around. I was sitting at Mark's office waiting, shaking like a leaf. Lillian was texting me every 5 minutes asking what was happening. 5:30 p.m., nothing happened, no one showed up, my phone didn't ring, the world didn't end. I realized then that the threat was probably designed to be a massive psychological bluff, intended solely to pressure me, the reliable source of income, into liquidating my assets. They wanted the easy $22,000, not the messy confrontation. But the online harassment didn't stop. They kept posting, using more menacing language, accusing Frances of being a secondary thief and demanding that chic happenstance fire both Lillian and Frances. The harassment campaign had officially gone viral, dragging the boutique's reputation through the mud. The burning down of the boutique was happening metaphorically, right? Fast forward to 1 week later, the Monday morning after the failed deadline. Frances Adams was arrested at chic happenstance at 8:45 a.m. right before the store opened. The state attorney's office had moved fast, primarily because they had enough evidence to prove Frances was operating the harassment accounts and that she had clear financial ties to the suspicious LLCs. The fallout was nuclear. Frances, realizing she was caught, tried to pull Lillian into the embezzlement scheme, claiming Lillian was the ringleader. The state attorney, however, found clear evidence of forged signatures and the burner phone traced directly to an apartment Frances owned. Lillian was cleared of the embezzlement charges, but she was still liable for the outstanding short-term loans, which were now piling up with interest. The loan sharks, seeing that their leverage, Frances was arrested and the situation had gone highly public and criminal, backed off me. The threatening texts stopped immediately. They went silent. The Instagram account was deactivated. My life was no longer collateral, small mercy. The divorce, however, was still a mess. I was safe, but I still had a soon-to-be ex-wife who owed a massive high-interest debt she couldn't pay, and she was still technically staying at my new temporary apartment. Lillian finally started undergoing some major character development. The shock of being threatened, witnessing a coworker go to jail, and the absolute humiliation of the online shaming finally broke through her layers of denial and superficiality. She looked at me and said, "Albert, I need to get out of this lifestyle. I need to get rid of this debt, and I need to stop caring what people think about my clothes or my job." I knew she meant it this time. She was finally acknowledging the core issue, the need for external validation, which led to the cheating, the reckless spending, and the whole terrifying debt spiral. I told her she needed a plan. And my plan for me involved one critical thing: severing the information supply. The biggest thing I realized through this whole nightmare, the thing that allowed Frances and the loan sharks to control and terrorize us, was information. They knew everything: our addresses, our jobs, our routines, our financial standing, our marital status. We were an open book. My resolution approach started then, about a week after Frances' arrest, the information diet. I told Lillian that in order for me to help her manage the debt and finalize the divorce cleanly, she had to commit to it too. By Tuesday, I was done with the drama. The information diet involved 10 social media. Lillian deactivated everything. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, no more external validation shopping, no more checking in on the gossip, no more public presence. I did the same. I even deleted the Reddit app for a few days. I know, hardcore. 2. No contact. Strict no contact with John Peterson, the enabling cousin, and especially Claire Hughes, the religious extremist parent. Blocked Claire on everything. I had to. She was still texting me Bible verses about forgiveness and judgment, implying my actions, calling the state attorney, were somehow against God's plan. Claire's toxicity was almost as damaging as the loan sharks. I had to starve that relationship. 3. Strict privacy. Change phone numbers, update security on bank accounts, close the joint accounts entirely, and keep the new apartment address completely private. No new friends, no oversharing with coworkers. 4. Financial reality check. Lillian needed to immediately sell the expensive handbags, the Peloton, and anything else she bought to maintain the facade. The proceeds wouldn't cover the $22,000 plus compounding interest debt, but it would show good faith and drastically cut down her monthly expenses. She took an entry-level job at a community center, a massive pay cut, but a huge emotional gain, as it didn't rely on superficial appearance. The first few weeks were awful. Lillian was experiencing withdrawal symptoms from the constant social validation. She was depressed, but she stuck to the information diet. She sold her Mini Cooper and bought a bus pass. She sold the $1,500 handbag for $300. She was scammed, naturally, but it was a lesson learned. Mark and I found a financial advisor who specialized in debt negotiation. Because the debt was high interest, predatory lending facilitated through a now jailed criminal Frances, we had some legal leverage to negotiate the total payoff amount with the original creditors, the loan sharks, who surprisingly didn't want the glare of a state attorney investigation on them. They just wanted some money. We got the debt lowered to $11,000 payable in installments. Lillian still has to pay it, but the pressure is off. She's dedicating 70% of her community center salary to paying off the loan, and she's living extremely frugally. 3 months later, where we are now, the divorce is finalized. It was clean and quick since neither of us cared about assets, only separation. Lillian moved into a tiny subsidized efficiency apartment downtown close to her new low-key job. She's completely off social media and seems genuinely happier despite being broke and in debt. She even apologized for the cheating, not in a desperate way, but in a real way, admitting it was about her own deep-seated insecurity and the need for external validation. I still have complicated feelings about her. I hate the damage she caused, but I don't hate her anymore. I'm thankful I helped her because it prevented the loan sharks from destroying my life too. I'm proud of her for sticking to the information diet and facing reality. I am in my new apartment, which is still a shoebox, but I changed the locks and installed a terrifyingly loud security system. I'm focusing on my commercial real estate job, which is slowly getting back on track. My relationship with my former mother-in-law, Claire Hughes, is permanently dead. She tried to show up at my old sublet address. She didn't know I moved and left me a handwritten note about how I need to accept Jesus and that I was partially responsible for the sin of usury. I shredded the note and put the entire address block on a permanent security watch. Claire's extremism will always be a part of Lillian's life, but I am no longer engaging. Starve the information, starve the drama. Frances Adams is awaiting trial, facing multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and harassment. Apparently, she tried to claim temporary insanity, but the state attorney has her dead to rights. The biggest change is my information diet. I realized that my own life had become too porous. I was oversharing with coworkers, posting too much about my routines, and letting my emotional state be dictated by external forces like Lillian's drama. Now I'm boring, and it is wonderful. I only talk about work at work. My social media is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. I don't share details about my money or my address with anyone but my lawyer and my closest friend, who brought me wine and spent hours helping me screenshot all the evidence, a true ally. I still get nervous when I see unfamiliar cars parked near my building. I still check the back seat before I get in the Civic. The fear doesn't disappear completely, but the paranoia is manageable. Yesterday I was walking home from work, and I saw a woman scrolling aggressively on her phone, clearly stressed out by whatever drama was unfolding on her screen. I realized that for the first time in months I wasn't doing that. I was just walking, listening to a podcast about boring infrastructure development and feeling a massive sense of calm. The resolution wasn't $22,000 being paid or some dramatic arrest where I got to be the hero. The resolution was changing my life so fundamentally that the people who use drama, manipulation, and information as currency can't touch me anymore. I'm eating less ramen now, TBH. Last night I actually cooked salmon. I even laughed at a really stupid dog video on my friend's phone and realized, hey, I'm gonna be okay. I guess the moral of the story isn't don't marry a cheater, though yeah, do that. It's that when organized crime threatens you via online harassment, the real solution might not be a confrontation or payment, but total informational lockdown. Starve the beast. I'm still navigating the financial recovery from the divorce and the stress, but I'm sleeping soundly now, and that's worth more than any $600 scarf from Chic Happenstance ever could be. Will update if I ever see Frances Adams in the checkout line at Trader Joe's and have to hide behind the organic kale chips. Thanks for letting me type out my absolute insane breakdown. Seriously, the comments helped me realize I wasn't the only one dealing with a ridiculously complicated mess. Peace out.